All right, so now we have Dr. Tayla von Ash from Brown University here in the US, and her talk is titled Correlates of Infant Sleep Duration, the Role of Childcare Arrangements, Parent Work Schedules, and Sibling School Schedules. Thanks, Tayla.
Can you see the slides?
We can, yes.
Okay,
Looks great.
awesome. So hello, everybody. I am happy to be here. Today I'll be presenting very preliminary findings from an analysis that I am collaborating with Nanit on, exploring the influence of parent and sibling schedules on infant sleep. And I suspect all of you who are watching are doing so because you already know how important sleep is for child health, so I won't waste too much time making that point. But I did want to highlight an article on Nanit's website written by Dr. Monica Ordway that provides a great summary of how crucial sufficient sleep is for growth and development during the first few years of life. Perhaps what some of you might not know, though, is that the timing of sleep also matters. And this is partly because timing influences duration. Specifically, research shows that earlier bedtimes are associated with significantly longer nighttime sleep durations in infants, whereas later bedtimes lead to only slightly later wake times. And to kind of demonstrate that magnitude, a 2020 study by Adams and colleagues found that 1 hour earlier bedtime was associated with 34-minute longer of nighttime sleep duration, but only 8 minutes earlier wake time. And studies like this are important because parents sometimes intentionally keep their children up late so that they'll wake up later, not realizing that babies seldom make up for the full amount of sleep lost on the front end. So their total sleep duration is typically less than if they were put to bed earlier. And this quote here is from a prior qualitative interview study that I conducted with mothers of 7 to 12-month-olds that nicely demonstrates this perspective. The mom said, I tried to put him to sleep earlier at like 9. He was asleep, but then woke up earlier, and we're not early birds, so that's why I put him to sleep late sometimes. So what determines timing? You've seen this now in an earlier presentation, but according to today's transactional model, which emphasizes the bidirectional relationships between parenting and infant sleep, characteristics of infant sleep, including timing, are influenced by both intrinsic and extrinsic factors, which are both shaped by distal environmental influences. And when it comes to identifying and understanding extrinsic or parenting and intrinsic infant factors, the existing literature is rich. However, when it comes to distal environmental influences, the literature is mostly focused on sociodemographic characteristics. And that is really helpful in identifying sleep disparities, but not so helpful in terms of understanding mechanisms that may be contributing to those disparities, or identifying risk factors that are maybe more easily modifiable. Essentially, little is known about how distal environmental factors beyond things like race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status may be impacting infant sleep. And so the aim of this exploratory analysis was to see whether parent and sibling schedules impact bedtime, wake time, and sleep duration in 4 to 24-month-olds. And this analysis was inspired by things mom shared in the qualitative study I previously mentioned. For example, this quote from a mom stated, I'm supposed to follow her sleep, but she follows mine, my schedule, basically. And so from this, I hypothesized that babies whose family had early work and school commitments would have earlier wake times, and those who have families with later work and school commitments or extracurricular commitments would have later bedtimes and possibly shorter sleep durations. And the rationale for my hypothesis comes from evidence demonstrating that parent work schedules affect sleep patterns in older children, though less is known about the effect in infants. However, a 2009 study by Rosenbaum and colleagues found that infants of parents who work non-standard hours have more behavioral problems. There is also strong evidence that early school start times negatively impact sleep among youth, but the potential impact on younger siblings is unclear, which is a gap that this study aims to address. For methods, we US-based Nanit users with a child between the age of 4 and 24 months old were invited to complete an online survey where we asked a number of things, including parent work start and end times, whether or not there were siblings in the home, specifically siblings who slept in the home at least 4 nights per week, and perceptions of how work, school, and extracurriculars impacted their baby's sleep. Sleep was objectively measured using Nanit camera monitors, as previously described. And in this analysis, we looked at average bedtime, average wake time, and average nighttime sleep duration. All data was collected in October of 2025 over a 2-week period. And the analytic sample for this analysis includes 513 babies. We restricted the sample to those with at least 1 night of objective sleep data. So more people filled out the survey than we had sleep data available for, and we excluded twins. In terms of methods for statistical analyses, we descriptively analyze the sociodemographic characteristics and variables of interest, including the parent perceptions of the impact of work, school, and extracurriculars. For parent perceptions, we only had this data available for 145 families because this was only asked of families who had more than one child. And then we conducted a series of linear regressions examining associations between work start times, work end times, and siblings in the home with the sleep outcomes of interest. Work start time was dichotomized with an early start being defined as starting before or by 7 a.m. And work end time was also dichotomized, again, using a 7 p.m. Cut point to define a late end. So the sample was 82% of the respondents were mothers, an average age of 34 years old. 96% were married or living with a partner. Most of them were employed full-time and had a college degree. In terms of early versus late start times for work, 24% of respondents started work by 7 a.m. 23% of partners did, so we asked separately for themselves and their partner if they had one. And in 8% of the homes did both caregivers if there were to begin work by 7 a.m. For work end time, 16% ended work 7 p.m. or later. That was 12% for partners, and in 5% of homes, all caregivers ended work at 7 p.m. or later. The babies were on average about 11 months. Close to half and half are female and male, predominantly white sample, with 33% of the sample having a sibling who slept in the home at least 3 nights per week. And just a note on their race, ethnicity, that was a check all that applies. So that's why the percentages exceed 100. For the sleep outcomes, the average nighttime sleep duration in the sample was 9.65 hours. The average bedtime was 7:59 p.m. and the average wake time was 6:38 a.m. For parent perceptions on how schedules impacted their baby's sleep, for the question, the item, my baby has to wake up earlier in the morning due to my or another caregiver's work schedule, 28% of the sample agreed with that statement. For my baby has to wake up earlier in the morning due to their siblings' school start time, 17% agreed with that statement. Or my baby goes to bed later in the evening due to my or another caregiver's work schedule, 15% endorsed that statement. And then for my baby goes to bed later in the evening due to sibling extracurricular activities, 13% endorsed that. And so it was not the majority of the sample, but still pretty meaningful, proportion of the sample. For the regression analysis, we did not find any significant associations between the variables of interest and nighttime sleep duration. However, later bedtimes were associated with ending work late, all caregivers in the home ending work late, and partner early start time. Whereas later wake times were associated with ending work late, all caregivers ending work late, and siblings in the home. And just to note, we ran these analyses with anybody with including anyone who had at least 1 night of sleep data, but we then reran it to look at those who had at least 5 nights of sleep data because we had a range up to 14 nights, and the findings were consistent. So discussion and next steps. So as I mentioned, this is still very preliminary, but taken together, I think the findings from this analysis suggest that parent work schedules influence the time that babies go to sleep and wake up. Specifically, babies whose parents worked late in this sample had later bedtimes and wake times than those whose parents finished work by 7 p.m. And a potential implication or importance of this work is that there could be impacts on the development of the circadian system as a result of these parent work schedules. However, further analyses are going to be done. Particularly, we're going to be adjusting for potential confounders. We're going to be examining work start and end times on a continuous variables, also examining additional sleep outcomes. And then what I'm most excited for actually is examining some potential effect modifiers. So for example, I think an important effect modifier might be sibling age, which we have that data on. Just knowing that high school students start school particularly early and tend to have extracurriculars that go later into the evening. And also, I think examining potential effect modifiers is important in thinking about health equity. So allowing us to kind of better understand risk factors for and buffers against some of these negative impacts of schedules. Um, Again, though, further studies are needed, first to replicate these findings, but also importantly with more diverse samples. So again, thinking about health equity, it's likely that the impact of schedules is going to be different for single parent households. And 96% of the families in this sample were married or living with a partner. And so I think future studies, it's going to be important to have more diversity in the samples. So thank you.